want to introduce our first speaker for tonight, who is someone that I personally know very well, met her for the first time in the UAE, and she has been a true inspiration, especially since October 7th. And I'm talking about, of course, Fleur Hassan Nahoum, who is Israel's Special Envoy for Trade and Innovation, formerly Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem and co-founder of the UAE-Israel Business Council. She has done many things as well. She is tirelessly an advocate for a united Jerusalem and for Israel on the world stage. So please welcome Fleur Hassan Nahoum.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here, especially because actually my claim to fame here tonight is that I'm married to a Baghdadi Calcuttan sitting right there. And let me tell you why this is special, because since I got into public life, we made an arrangement that I was never going to drag him to anything that I didn't think he would enjoy. And therefore, he doesn't really come along with me to practically any evening events, and I do have many evening events. But tonight, I couldn't hold him back, because this is an event about India, and my husband's family in Calcutta have a very famous bakery, and the bakery is part of the fabric of life, not just for Jews, but for all people in Calcutta. And I was thrilled that our author for tonight, Paushali, is a fan of the bakery. And so we're going to send you a packet of cakes to Germany, okay? On us. So I'm also very honored to be amongst some incredibly impressive people here. Rav Doron, who leads one of the most exciting movements in the Zionist religious world, and who we're very privileged, I'm the Secretary General of Kol Israel, to work together on many things that unite our people, and hopefully we will continue to do that. And a very modest friend of mine over here, Shalva Weil, who's not only the foremost authority on Indian Jews here in Israel, she has just been awarded the equivalent of the freedom of the city of Jerusalem. So I want to give a clap. Yekirat Yerushalayim, that we are so honored. In general, so pretty wide, and I'm not going to speak for too long because you have some incredible speakers here tonight. And unfortunately, I have to go because I'm speaking to some Spanish-speaking journalists, and believe me, they're a much tougher crowd than you. But essentially, what I wanted to say is that when you grow up in little communities, I grew up in Gibraltar. What is Gibraltar? It's a little territory in southern Spain, which is British, and we are still a British colony, even though I'm not allowed to say the word colony apparently, but we are a British protectorate, and we grew up, there were 700 Jews. And when you grow up in such a tiny community, it doesn't matter what your political beliefs are, it doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are, everybody has one of everything, except shuls. Come on, we're Jews. So we have 4 shuls, but apart from shuls, we have one youth group, and we have one Jewish club, and we have one kosher restaurant, and therefore it doesn't matter whether you think this or you think that. At the end of the day, when you're brought up in the diaspora, built in, you are brought up to get along with people who are not exactly from your opinion or not exactly from your denomination. And this is something that we've kind of, America's lost a little bit because it's such a huge country, and even Israel is losing a little bit. So I think that diaspora Jews have an incredibly important gift to give Israel. And I'll go further. I think Sephardi or Mizrahi Jews also have a very special gift to give Israel. And that is that Mizrahi, Sephardi Jews have always been a bridge. They've been a bridge between the secular and the religious, because we've never been extremes. We've always been kind of in the middle. Never really gone this way, never gone that way, never gone completely secular, never gone completely Haredi, let's be honest. We've always kept ourselves very much in the mainstream and the center. But we are also a bridge between Jews and Arabs. It's very important to recognize that, because we culturally understand the Arab mentality. And I think that is something that Israel misses here, utilizing it's Mizrahi leadership, if there is any, whatever there is, to actually be that bridge. So I'm going to give two anecdotes, one of my time in City Hall and the other one of my time when I met you, Yair, in the UAE. And in City Hall, you know, of Jerusalem, which I was at for 8 years as a city council member and then as one of the deputy mayors, we have half of City Hall are actually ultra-Orthodox Haredi representatives. And then the other half is a mixture of so many people. And so what you realize very quickly is that you have to create coalitions even with the most unlikely partners. And I think that, again, that is something that we have to recapture. And that's something that, ironically, politics, which sometimes seems so divided, when the cameras are off, believe me, it's a whole other story. So my stories are getting together with some Haredi representatives in order to create a coalition and find common interests in, for example, how do we keep this city holy and yet accessible to all its populations, including the secular populations? How do we do that? How do we keep the integrity of the holiness of the city of Jerusalem while still being an inclusive city? So there are some people that you could really speak to. They understood that this city couldn't just become a completely ultra-Orthodox city. They understood that we needed here the mixture, the mosaic that is Jerusalem, because that is in our DNA. And we always have to remember that Jerusalem, 3,000 years ago, became the capital of the Jewish kingdom. But Jerusalem is the reason why we are one people and not 12 tribes. Because King David decided to create the capital in neutral ground. His patch was Hebron. That was his capital. He was the king of Judea. But he chose Jerusalem because Jerusalem was a place that didn't belong to any one tribe. And so for me, when I worked in Jerusalem for 8 years, it was very important to keep the integrity of that unity and diversity. And unity is not something that people necessarily think of when they think of Jerusalem, but it's actually much more unity than you would think. And so, yes, so we get together to figure out with the Haredi leaders how we could keep everybody happy. They would leave the room when we had to pass budgets for things that they couldn't vote for, like budgets for the LGBTQ community. They would leave, and then when it was passed, they would come back, and everybody would be happy, and then I would leave when they had to pass something that I didn't agree with, but we would make sure that it was going through, even if we were leaving the room. That's, the tactics you use. But again, the minute the cameras were on, everybody was confrontational. The minute the cameras were off, everybody was looking to build consensus. And that's something we can't forget. And in Jerusalem, we built incredible bridges between ultra-Orthodox Jews and secular Jews, between Arabs and Jews. COVID was actually, I spoke in the UN about the fact that COVID was an incredibly uniting moment for the city of Jerusalem, because for once we had a common enemy, which was the virus. So everybody was pulling together and everybody was working together. We were finding solutions together. We created this task force of volunteers. And those bonds that we built during COVID stayed after COVID between all the various communities of the city of Jerusalem. And my second experience, which I think is important when we talk about unity, is what happened with the Abraham Accords. So the Abraham Accords was something that not very many people expected would happen, but it did happen. And the moment that happened, it was such an incredible opportunity to build a region that our forefathers and mothers, before the establishment of the State of Israel, had envisioned. And that is Israel has always wanted to be part of the region, but we were not accepted as part of the region. In fact, they tried to destroy us many times. But all of a sudden, when you become a strong, independent country, it's amazing how people actually want to be your friend. And in 2020, under the previous administration of Trump, all of a sudden, we see ourselves in this situation where the Emiratis announced that they're going to have a peace with Israel. And I was part of the first ever Zoom meeting between Emiratis and Israelis. And we were all so excited. I can't even begin to describe the excitement. Somebody quoted me somewhere saying that it was, I felt that the first years like we were dating. Everybody was so excited to find out, so what do you do for this? And what's your custom for that? And it just was a very important lesson of what could be, And I think in these moments of darkness that we've experienced so deeply in the last year and a half, we always have to hang on to those lights at the end of the tunnel. And the fact that the Abraham Accords has stood over the harshest test of all, which is one of the harshest wars that we've ever had to fight, and the loss that we've had in this war, the tragedy that we've had in this war, we have to hang on to the points of light. And for me, those points of light are three. The first one is the resilience of our people. Nobody can be punched down in the way that we were and jump up so quickly to move forward. No, I don't know anybody, and people look around and like, how are you leading a normal life in your country? How is the stock exchange up 28% when everywhere else in the world is down? How is the shekel stronger than the dollar right now? How is it that we have a prediction of 4% growth in our country this year? And how is it that we've had 500% increase in investment in cybersecurity over the last year? This is what we do in the middle of a war. Imagine what we could do if there was peace. So the first light for me is that resilience, that strength. The second light is what I mentioned, the fact that our regional partners are still in the game. And in fact, my prediction is that over the next year, we're going to be having peace with Saudi Arabia. And I'm very excited also to be involved in an incredible initiative called I2U2. India, Israel, America, and USA and UAE. And this is a quadrilateral agreement that will take the benefits, the economic benefits and the markets of India and the UAE, the USA and Israel, to look forward into economic prosperity together. And I'm thrilled that India is very much a part of what the Abraham Accords will look like in phase 2 of the implementation of the Abraham Accords, because India is a friend, India is an ally, and India is a bridge. And so that's a very important thing to remember. And the third light at the end of the tunnel is that for a little bit, and this is what we really have to work on, is that unity that came after October 7th. We were such a divided country on October 6th, and I'm beginning to feel that the cracks are opening up again. But we can't forget how united we were after October 7th, after the tragedy. We can't forget that our enemies don't distinguish whether we're right-wing or left-wing or religious or secular. They don't care. They don't discriminate. So why are we dividing ourselves when they really don't care what we think of each other? And Rabbi Sachs once said that the only people who can defeat the Jewish people is the Jewish people. And so this is why these encounters are important, and this is why we have to keep that in mind, and this is why we have to grab on to those bridges. And I'm very proud to say that the party, my party, Kol Israel, which I'm the Secretary General of, we are a bridge building party. Mizrahi is also a bridge building party, and these are essentially the organizations that are going to move our people forward from this very difficult situation. And so I thank you again, Paushali, for doing such an amazing thing, not just for writing this book about the incredible heritage of the Jews of India, but for the fact that you are a pro-Israel advocate in your space in Germany today. You're out there every single week advocating for the hostages, and believe me, we don't forget our friends. So God bless you for everything you do and for being here today. Thank you.
Did you? You didn't have a vision on Saturday. She's pleading the fifth. Okay. Okay. The vision was I'd be here, Baruch Hashem, so we are fulfilling the vision. So I just want to say it really is an honor and privilege to be here. And thank you, Yair, for your wonderful introduction. I do remember that conversation. And when I introduced you via this, I'll come to Professor Waam. Is it Waam? I haven't had an opportunity to meet you. It's a zchut to meet you, especially such a renowned researcher. Ariella Daniels, Shaukat, for all of your work that you do on behalf of all of your advocacy. Sarah Sassoon is indeed our shadchanet between us and Palisha. Thank you very, very much. And her husband David are very dear friends. Of course, when the two schools of Hillel and Shammai, who debated more than any two schools, I think there's 316 or 416 debates, I can't remember. I read somewhere in a paper of many hundreds of debates between these two schools, and a voice from heaven came down and said, I'll tell you who's right. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. These and these are the words of the living God. Because the chidush, the novel idea of Judaism, that there is absolute truth, but there are different ways of interpreting the truth, not endless morally relative ways, but various. The truth has to be complex. These and these are the words of the living God, and we've lost that. We've lost the ability, I really believe today, especially today, that if you want to disagree with somebody, and we should disagree with people because no two people think the same, first, before you disagree with them, can you first articulate very clearly what it is they're saying, why they believe it, and what element of truth it has? And if you cannot say that, then I don't want to hear your opinion. Because your opinion is so subjective and self-righteous that you don't understand that there can be another side. That's what got us into this place in the first place, this situation, where people can't even listen to the other side. I remember during the judicial reform challenges, and again, not getting into who's right, who's wrong, I think there's elements of truth in both. I remember we organized an event in Teaneck where the shul rabbi wanted to put forward this particular issue a year and a half ago. We had one person from the right-wing Israeli politics and one from the left, and there was a very big demonstration going on outside. And I remember that my friend who was organized this said to me, he went to the demonstration outside, he was shouting, Busha and Busha and Busha. And he said, but we're hearing today the views of Simcha Rotman on Thursday night, and on Saturday night we're hearing the views of somebody who opposes. And the answer was, how dare you even listen to the other side? Even listening is no, when you can't even hear. You've become so self-righteous in your own echo chamber that you cannot even hear the other side. That is our challenge. That doesn't mean everyone's right in everything, but it means in so many cases there's an element of truth. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. One of my favorite stories, and I'm sure you all know the story, is that Jews have a big passion for truth. There's a famous story that when a Jew goes to the moon, they build two synagogues. Yeah? The one they pray in and the one they don't pray in. This is the one I believe in, and that's what I don't believe in. Just wanted to be clear that I believe in this and not in that. But there's an even better Jewish story, which I believe is the solution. If that is the problem, then this is the solution. And I love the story, and I'm sure you've heard it, and I love it because I think it is the solution to the challenge of diversity. There was a rabbi, and I'll end with this, and one comment about Hillel, why we read according to Hillel. There was a rabbi who was listening to a case of a person who came to tell him, Rabbi, let me explain to you why the person in this community is so wrong, they've done terrible things against me, and the person articulates for half an hour their claims, and the rabbi says, you're right, everything you said makes sense. Half an hour later, the other person comes, who the person had an issue with, and tells the rabbi the other side of the story. For half an hour, exactly refuting everything the other person said. The rabbi looks him in the eye and says, you're right. And the shamus assisting the rabbi when he goes out says, Rabbi, forgive me, I'm the only person who's been in the room for both. They can't both be right. I heard everything that he said, everything that he said. There's no way they can both be right. And he says, you know what? You're also right. And the truth is that all of them have an element of truth. And the truth is we have to be able to discover, because how we deal with truth, whether we are absolutionists or whether we have uniformity or whether we are relativists, we're not getting to the issue. It's pragmatism, as Fleur said, but I believe at the heart of pragmatism is a philosophical understanding that often our debates are not between black and white like it is with Hamas, where it's clear, but often our debates within are between shades of the truth, and each one fighting for which shade should be the stronger one. We can debate that, and we should debate it, but let's at least agree that Eilu ve'Eilu, each one has an element of truth. And the final thing I want to say, and I end with this, why do we rule according to Beit Shammai? If the truth is both according to Hillel and both according to Shammai, the Talmud in Masechet Eruvin Daf Yud Gimel says, Eilu ve'Eilu divrei Elokim chaim. The same voice which came from heaven said, V'halacha keBeit Hillel, but we rule according to Beit Hillel. Why? Were they cleverer? Did they study harder? Our sages say that Beit Shammai were chadidei tfei, they were better students and actually were cleverer. If they did an IQ test, they would probably win. So, why don't we rule according to the cleverer people? And the Talmud says, I'll tell you why. For 3 reasons. It says, Beit Hillel, Aluvim Hain, were more modest. We like modest people. Secondly, they never quoted their own opinion without quoting the opinion of Beit Shammai. They acknowledged, the truly clever people acknowledge that we don't have all of the truth. We all thought we had all the truth. The Shabbat thought that all the truth. Israeli military intelligence thought, we all thought we had all the truth. What comes out of all of these things is, maybe as clear as you are in your view, maybe there's an alternative view, and maybe there shouldn't be groupthink, and maybe we should challenge our views. And why do we rule like Shammai, Hillel? Because Hillel wasn't cleverer than Shammai, but he was, not in IQ, but in EQ. To understand, it's not even EQ, it's actually genuine intelligence, not EQ. It's, I call it a moral, spiritual intelligence which understands that the truth about the truth is it really is complex. Not because everything goes, we're not moral relativists, and not because we are absolute, but because we just need a bit of humility. And your humility, say the sages, because you could see that there's an alternative view. And you always quoted and validated Beit Shammai's view. You know what? We're going to rule according to you. And please God, we should be able to have unity and diversity, not uniformity and not relativism. There is truth, there's absolute truth. But when it comes into the subjective world, it has different interpretations, and we should all have the humility to be able to validate the other opinions before disagreeing with them and realize at the end of the day, we're all in this together. Thank you very much.
That is truly incredible. We all wish he returns home as quick as possible, and the resilience that you show is a true inspiration. Next, we want to welcome a trailblazer in Jewish anthropology and a world expert on the Jews of India. Professor Shava Weil has devoted decades of research to this unique diaspora. She is based at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where I studied, and brings rich academic insight into tonight's celebration. Professor Shava Weil, please.
So I want to open with an apology that you all waited for me. I'm completely out of things. I came back from South Africa yesterday morning from Cape Town, where I was attending a conference on Jewish Africa, and now we're switching to Jewish India. So please forgive me, and also I couldn't find the building or the parking lot. My second comment is congratulations. You came from outside and you managed to put together this amazing evening. Congratulations. It really is a feat. Also to invite my dear friend Fleur Hassan Nahoum, and also the pleasure of hearing the eloquent Rabbi Peretz. I just don't have any words to describe my admiration for you, and my heart goes out to you and your wife. I don't know how you can stand here and speak to us so beautifully, and you've been through so much. So let us all hope and pray that all the hostages, and unfortunately some of the dead hostages, will return very, very fast. I'm so sorry. I want to just begin by saying that I feel total empathy with you, because my own grandfather, whom I never knew, in 1923 was the representative of the World Mizrahi movement at the Zionist Congress in Carlsbad. And he...
What's his name?
Yeah, Dimson, that's my...
What's his name?
Zachariah Dimson, that's my maiden name. And I have the ticket for the Zionist Congress, I still have it. I can send it to you to show it to you, and it says on it Mizrahi, there, and he came from England representing Mizrahi and spoke at the Zionist Congress, and that's how I was brought up. Unfortunately, after Carlsbad, they sent him to Palestine, what was Palestine, Eretz Israel. And he came to Eretz Israel and wrote a report for the newly founded JNF, Jewish National Fund, as to where Anglo-Jewry should be settled after the Balfour Declaration. And he wrote this long report, of which we have a copy, which said that he really thought the best place was Gaza because there were no Arabs there. And then he caught typhoid and died in Shari Tzedek in January 1924, so that's how I never knew him. But this is my grandfather. So what I want to talk about today is unity in Indian Jewish diversity. And I thank my friends Sarah Sassoon and Ariella Danielle for being here and being behind the scenes and inviting me and just being friends. So unity in Jewish diversity is wide, and Fleur spoke beautifully about this subject. But you'd think that Indian Jewry is a homogeneous little ethnic group, and they are pretty small, but there are lots of different kinds of Indian Jews, and one of them belongs to the Ben Israel, Matan Changalka, who's still in captivity as a hostage. How do we know that he's Ben Israel? Because the name Kar, K-A-R, is always a name of a Ben Israel. It means from the village of. And so they were, Matan Changalka is from the village of Changal. And there's Benka from the village of Pen, Nagalka from the village of Now. And what does that mean? How did they get there? According to the Ben Israel, which is the largest Indian Jewish group, which at their peak in India, before Indian independence in 1947, number 28,000. Today there are probably about, 80,000, 90,000 Ben Israel in Israel. It's very difficult to know because these are descendants of the people who came on Aliyah. According to their heritage and narrative, the Ben Israel arrived in India probably in the year 175 BCE. This was the time of Antiochus coming off and trying to kill us all off. And these people may have been, there are other theories as well, this is a legend, that may have been part of the tribe of Zvulun, one of the 10 tribes of Israel, from the kingdom of Israel. If you recall your Bible history, Zvulun were seafaring people. So they jumped on a boat, and alas, they were shipwrecked off the Konkan coast, which is south of Bombay, or what's called Mumbai today. And so these people, the tribe of Zvulun, sort of scrambled up on the shore, and they saw these weirdo-looking people, and basically these people said to them, "Who are you?" And they said, "We're Bnei Israel." They call themselves Bnei Israel. We're the children of Israel. So they said, if you've anybody been to India, Indians are very, very hospitable. "Oh, come and live with us. Everything's fine." They said, wait a minute. We have to get our holy books from the shipwreck. Oh, they've fallen into the sea. So we don't have any holy books. But what about our dead? And they brought the dead up and they buried them in 2 mounds, which I always found quite interesting, one for men and one for women, in the village of Naugao. And as I mentioned, there are families called Nagalka from the village of Naugao. This is the Konkan villages south of Bombay. And so they lived on the Konkan coast for hundreds of years until they were discovered, as it were, by a man called David Rahabi. Now, there are lots of theories. There's no time to go into all this. This isn't a long lecture. But there's loads of theories of who this David Rahabi was. But he is probably part of the Rahabi family from Cochin. Now, Cochin had a nice Jewish community down south, on the tip of India. And they were divided into two different groups. What's called the Paradesi, who are the Sephardi people who came from Spain or other places, and Portugal, even Yemen. And there were the Malabari Jews, the Jews who probably were indigenous, who might have come with King Solomon and his fleets to the south of India. And Rahabi family are definitely documented. They, Ezekiel Rahabi was the chief merchant of the East India Company, with their Dutch East India Company, with the headquarters in Amsterdam. And that's why Cochin Jewry has never had any safek, any doubt about their Jewish identity, as opposed to other Indian Jewish groups, because they were in touch with Amsterdam, which was a very big center for Judaism for centuries. And so, and they received their holy books and their Sidurim and everything via Amsterdam. So it's probable that this is, I'm really making this short, and so don't pick me up on this, but it's probable that David Rahabi, who discovered, as it were, the Ben Israel, may have been from the Cochin Jewish community, may have been a descendant of Ezekiel Rahabi. Whatever, David Rahabi definitely taught the Ben Israel about the tenets of Judaism, because, as I mentioned, they didn't know too much, and their holy books had gone down in the shipwreck, and he taught them about what other Jewish communities do, and this long process of coming in line with other Jewish communities basically has been completed today. It took a few hundred years. Now, the Ben Israel lived in India, and the most important thing to say is that Indian Jews never suffered any anti-Semitism. And in a world in which we are all suffering from anti-Semitism, this is a remarkable feat. The only time that there was anti-Semitism was under the Portuguese colonial period, when the Portuguese set up an inquisition, actually, in Goa, south of Bombay, and then they had a mini inquisition in Cochin. And in fact, 17 people were tried in Cochin, the most unbelievable inquisition records, where they were accused of being Jewish, and they said, yes, we were Jewish. And we used to celebrate Purim, of all things, and they were burnt at the stake, but only 17 of them, whereas thousands of people were burnt at the stake in Lisbon. So we've already covered in this very brief survey 3 different groups, not 2, 3 different groups of Indian Jews. One are the Ben Israel of Bombay, 2 are the 2 different groups of Cochin Jews. Now, Cochin Jews are the smallest community in India. At their peak, and in fact in the world, they numbered 2,400. And so they're really teeny-weeny, and in fact today there's one Paradesi, one, what they used to call in the old days white Jew, I don't really like that, it's not politically correct today, living in what's called Jewtown in Cochin, near the synagogue in Cochin, where some of you may have been there. And there are just a few Malabari Jews today dotted around Kerala, and most of the Cochin Jews are here in Israel and have multiplied and been very successful. And they largely live in agricultural settlements, moshavim, in Israel. Now, the next Jewish group that I want to mention, this is really like Regel Achat, and telling the Torah on Regel Achat, are the wonderful Baghdadi Jews. And we've mentioned the tasty Nahoum bakery. Oh, you're still here? Well, it's not, I didn't say it for you, but it's the best place in Calcutta, even better than those palaces. And I had the privilege of knowing Adam's very sweet father, and also who's passed away recently, and also very sweet uncles. They were very, very sweet when I came to Calcutta, and when I spent time at the Saturday Club, my friend Rolly's parents were then, I think they were running it, were they? Or they just, yes, they were running the Saturday Club in Calcutta. And the Nahoums brought me food that they knew that I could eat. They were so sweet. So the Baghdadis settled in Calcutta in the 18th century, from the 18th century on, and in Bombay, where I've mentioned that the Ben Israel lived, the head of the Bombay Baghdadi community is the famous patriarch David Sassoon. Now, everybody here will have heard of the Sassoons. They were basically the Rothschilds of the East, the richest people, certainly in the East, the richest Jews in the East. And David Sassoon had lots and lots of kids. This is also very fast, I'm mentioning, but his eldest son, Abdullah, who was born in Baghdad and then went through Basra and came to Bombay, later became Sir Albert Sassoon, and he went to live in Hove and Brighton in England, and where he got knighted, and he didn't even want to go back home, and his wife stayed in Bombay, and he was really, really very British and became very friendly with the royal family. And if you go to, I was recently, meaning recently being about 3 years ago, during COVID, I had a fellowship at Cambridge University, and there was nothing to do because everything was shut. Like I came to work in the library on the Sassoon archives, and the library was shut. So the only thing I could do is take a train, and there was a direct train from Cambridge to Brighton. So I took that train, and below me down on one of the buildings it says, this is where Edward VII used to spend his weekends. And it was, one of the Sassoon buildings. It was quite crazy. Apparently this Edward, whatever, had all these women that he used to entertain at the Sassoon household. It was quite extraordinary. Anyway, David Sassoon was very orthodox, and Abdallah became a little bit less orthodox, but when he was living in Hove, he still had this Baghdadi thing, and he decided to build himself a mausoleum like his dad. His dad is buried in Pune in 1865. So Abdallah thought that he should have a mausoleum, but in Brighton. So he built this thing, which is sort of Oriental style, extraordinary, next to his house, which today is a transgender bar and is still called the Bombay Bar. And I went in there and I said, could I just photograph inside here? And I really felt very, very weird there. I said, this used to be where Sir Albert Sassoon was buried. So what happened was that Sir Albert Sassoon was buried in his mausoleum, and he had also a lot of children. I'll save you the whole lineage. But one of his eldest son was called Edward, and he also was knighted, Sir Edward Sassoon, who was less interested in Judaism, and he was buried in the liberal synagogue, which is very, very liberal, progressive Judaism. And by the time Edward's son came around, he decided to transfer both Edward and Abdullah to the Willesden Jewish Cemetery. But Abdullah was in a grave, but guess where Edward was? In a jar. So you have in the Orthodox Willesden Cemetery, you have a grave and then a jar for Edward. And then, of course, the next generation married out. So it's all very fascinating. But the Baghdadis were a very, very strong community, and their presence can be felt in every single town or city in India. They built beautiful monuments. They were very big philanthropists, primarily in Bombay, Pune, and Calcutta. And I'll just end my extraordinarily short survey of the diversity of Indian Jewry by mentioning that there are also other groups in India who are claiming that they are Jews or lost tribes. One of these is the so-called B'nai Menashe. Several thousand of these have succeeded in coming to Israel, converting, but coming to Israel. And just this morning, somebody wrote to me saying, hello, I'm a Telugu Jew, can you send me a book in Hebrew and all that? I get them practically every day. There are all these groups all over India who are Judaizing. And the same is happening, by the way, in Africa, where I was at the Jewish Africa Conference. The same thing is happening. So what happens is that in a world which is in turmoil today, the Jewish people is suffering from anti-Semitism in nearly every country. India is better than most. And at the same time, and people are less aware of this, there is a huge movement of people who want to be Jewish, who want to be our friends. They're usually the underdog, they're usually socioeconomically poor, but even so, it's extremely interesting. And with that thought, which is really, really interesting, I want to just conclude by saying that I commend I commend you, Paushali, and I commend this book and your efforts to bring us all together. And I have the privilege also of knowing Anne Samson in Canada, and I haven't yet discovered what her Kerr name is. Kerr, from the village of, because she became very British. A lot of the Ben Israel became very anglicized, and they removed the Kerr name. However, the interesting thing is that if you, any of you, and I see that there are some Ben Israel, very revered Ben Israel in the audience, if you go to a Ben Israel synagogue in Israel or anywhere, when you go up to the Torah, everybody knows what I'm talking about, we have an aliyah. They call you, even if you're called Anne Samson or David Samson, we'll say, they call you David Samson, and then they'll call you Nagarka. So they'll call you by your Kerr name, your original name. They had a big problem when I was doing field work amongst the Ben Israel. I lived with them for 3 years in the town of Lod. So they had to call up my husband for an aliyah, and they didn't know what to do, Michael Weil. So they would go, Yair, Michael Wilker. So that's how I became an honorary Indian. And with that, I'd like to congratulate you on your book and everything that you do. Thank you.
And so I was very attracted to that. And then years later, when I went to study in the UK, I came to faith in the God of the Bible through believing in, Jesus, but I was like very much attracted to the Jewishness of Jesus more than anything. So as my faith in the God of the Bible grew, so did my connection with the Jewish people, their history, and my unwavering support for the existence of Israel. Wow. And also, Zionism is the movement to restore the Jewish people to their ancestral homeland. To me, it's not a political one, but a deeply spiritual one. The word Zion is mentioned 157 times in the Tanakh. So it is absolutely crucial in today's world to ensure that this connection is not erased, but we need to share the story. So yes, my spiritual connection. Actually many, but because I come from outside the community, I'll say one of my favorite Indian food is biryani. I don't know whether you know what biryani is. It's a meat and rice dish, and in India there are like different types of biryani. What is interesting about, and we have a recipe of biryani, kosher biryani or following the kashrut, is, can you imagine what it might be? In what way is the Jewish biryani different from any regular biryani in India? Exactly, because one of the essential ingredients of non-Jewish community, or for the whole of India, is yogurt. Yogurt is it's an essential ingredient in marinating meat. So it's come from the Muslims, because India has a lot of Muslims. So, but the Jews, they do not mix meat and dairy. So you find other alternatives. So either non-dairy yogurt or even skimming yogurt. And I do that, and it's equally tasty. So.
Okay, we've got many questions, but we're going to have a final one, if that's okay with you. Yeah, you want more?
No, I have to. Okay, so I just want to end with this because I don't want to talk for too long, but for people, because of people like Anne Samson, who tirelessly advocated for unity, for all types of Jews, even in Israel, because of that, somebody like me can come to Israel and feel so much at home. You know, Israel is one country where I've always felt at home, you know, and I don't even belong to the Jewish community, but I have someone like Gidon Ariella, you know, every time I come to Israel, he says, welcome home. Yair sends me a text, welcome home. And so that's how I feel about Israel, and I think I owe a lot to people like Samson who's made it possible.
That is incredible. And on that note, I'm just going to ask a final question. What's your hope for this book's impact?
Well, maybe I'll get some ideas from the audience later on, but my wish is that the Jewish people in the diaspora especially get to know about the rich heritage of the Jewish people around the world, you know, and that Jews have a collective identity, but within that collective identity there's a lot of diversity. And going back to what Rabbi Perez said earlier, we don't have to do things like the others do, but you know, there is diversity, but in that we need to find points of unity. And I want this conversation to go on. So it's the start of an education initiative in Germany especially.
Thank you so much, Paushali. Round of applause. Okay, so next. Sassoon is a poet, educator, and Iraqi Jewish storyteller whose work preserves the voices of Middle Eastern Jews. She'll also explore the powerful historic connection between Iraqi and Indian Jewish communities. Sassoon.
Wow, thank you. I know you're all tired, so I'll try to keep 2,600 years of history very brief. Let's go back to the origin story of us as Jews. When I go back as an Iraqi Jew, I go back to King Yehoiakim, who was exiled by King Nebuchadnezzar in 598 BCE, before the first, who was exiled by King Nebuchadnezzar in 598 BCE, before the first temple was destroyed. He was taken. And amongst Iraqi Jews, which is where I come from, all my grandparents are from Iraq. My dad was born in Baghdad. The story is he carried on his back a sack of dust and stones from Jerusalem, and he buried that under the first synagogue in Iraq, in Babylon at the time, which they say is under the great synagogue in Baghdad. This is a legend, yes. But that same synagogue, the great synagogue in Baghdad, if you enter it, there is a stone. And the stone says on it, this is a stone from Eretz Israel. And as you enter, you're meant to kiss it, because you are honoring where you come from. His 9-year-old daughter maybe one day can live in a country like Israel, and maybe there'll be Abraham Accords between Iraq and Israel, my friend tells me. He wants freedom and safety for his daughter. That is what the Middle East wants, and that is what Israel represents, and that is the truth that I think both sides of the inner conflict in Israel want as well. And if we just hold on to our truth and can share this truth together, as well as our differences, hopefully we'll be able to look forward to better times, just one day at a time, one person at a time.
I have not read the book yet. I'm going to receive the book today, and I'm really excited, but of course I know her story. And the immigration story coming from India to Canada is quite bittersweet. You know, there's obviously many positives, but as well many negatives and obstacles and challenges that were faced. The beginning was not easy. My Aunt Elizabeth can attest from her childhood. You're leaving a country where you didn't experience anti-Semitism, where your Jewish heritage and identity goes back thousands of years. As Shalva mentioned, there's the long history of our community. For better opportunities. That was the main reason why my family left India, just to get opportunities in the West, and to be reconnected with the world Jewry. It's opportunity, right? Only to face, I wouldn't call it racism, because we're one people, discrimination, not just from Ashkenaz communities, but from everybody. And I think that's also something that we have to be clear about, and We can talk about the positives of today, but back then it was not just discrimination that we faced from the Ashkenaz community. We faced it from the Iraqi community. We faced it from the Moroccan community. It's painful to say, but I'm not gonna not share this. It's important. It's a fact. So much so that they were surprised. You know, when my family moved to Canada, it was around the time of the high holidays, and they didn't understand they wouldn't have a place to pray. In India, synagogue is free. You show up, you're part of the community, you attend prayers, we're all one people. In North America, you have to pay for a membership. And when you can't take your funds, your money out of the country for legal purposes, and you can't afford a membership of a synagogue, where are you gonna go? Sephardics didn't accept you, Ashkenazim didn't accept you, so you pray from home. And actually, Auntie Anne and my grandfather, amongst a few other B'nai Israeli leaders of the community back then in the 60s, they had started Congregation Bina, B'nai Israel of North America, because they did not feel welcome in many communities. It's through connecting to our diaspora narrative that we're able to actually connect to our past, which is very interesting, because when people think of diaspora narrative, they think, oh, you're being removed from the origins of your people. But for us in the B'nai Israel,
Jewish communities are not just Eastern Europe. Maybe that's the beginning of the solution. Maybe that, again, as Rav Doron Peretz and also Fleur Hassan Nahoum mentioned, Rabbi Sachs says this: anti-Semitism evolved. In the beginning it was against our religion, then it was against our race, and now it's against our nation state. So that's always going to be there. But maybe we could do something in order to shed a light. And my hope is that from this evening, we learned so much, and I'm sure you want to continue the conversations, but one thing that we learned is that our unity shined after October 7th, and we're feeling that it's a little bit breaking now, a little too much. I hope that we don't need tragedies in order to be united. Kochenu be'achdutenu, our strength is in our unity. I hope you all enjoyed an incredible, insightful evening. Thank you so much for all the speakers, and thank you everyone here for coming.